Hello friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Danni and today we're going to go through a subscriber vlog that I promised you guys a little bit ago. Within this vlog, you guys are going to see 3 books, 2 that I will be reading, 1 that I will just be hauling. One of those was The Grief of Stones, 1 is The Sky on Fire by Jen Lyons, and 1 is The Hollow Places. The Hollow Places will be the book haul that I will show you guys at some point in time. So this is a request from you all during my 900 subscriber celebration. This was something that I did after the scavenger hunt. And so now I've read both of the books and I want to talk to you guys about them. And so let's see what I thought. Hello all, I have gotten to 35% of The Grief of Stones and this book is reading very, very fast, which makes sense because it's only like 240 pages. But I wanted to stop and give you guys an update on my progress with this and what I'm thinking of the story so far. This book follows Thara Kelleher, who is a witness for the dead. So the first book in the novella series, The Witness for the Dead, does follow the same character, and I would recommend reading this before The Grief of Stones because there is a slight spoiler. Well, it's kind of a big spoiler, but you might not realize it at the beginning of this. If you're not good with names, you could probably read this and not realize that it has any connection to the end of this book, but there is a pretty big spoiler at the beginning of this that tells you how this book ends. So it doesn't tell you all the mysteries and stuff within the first book, but still something you need to know. So A Witness for the Dead, if you haven't read any of the books, so Goblin Emperor is the main the larger book, and then you have 2 novellas. In A Witness for the Dead, they can talk to the dead, and they also investigate deaths to kind of be a person who upholds the dignity and the love of the people who we've lost. And so they're kind of like someone's last witness is the only word that's coming to mind. And I just freaking love this character. I don't know what it is about this entire series that feels so cozy to me. It's not cozy fantasy, it's political fantasy, and there is definitely politics going on in here, but the way the story is told and the things that the character goes through are heartbreaking and heartwarming, and I love him. I love him so much. He is I just find him so fascinating. One of the things that is dealt with in this book, so there is a mystery in actually both of these, well, all 3, the Goblin Emperor as well have a mystery involved, but specifically these deal with Thara, whose main goal is to witness for the dead and solve these mysteries, and they both have an overarching murder that they are solving. And so in this book, we are requested at the very beginning of the book to help witness for this woman who has died seemingly of natural causes, but her husband thinks that there might have been foul play, and so he asks Thara to come in and investigate, and so that's what he does. But as the investigation is going on, there also are all these little tiny things that are happening throughout the city that he is in that you get to learn about, and they're so meaningful even though they're such small things. For example, one of the events that happens in this book is a young woman has her first child and it is born as a stillborn. And you don't get to see that, you just know that it happens from someone else who is telling the prelate, Thara, what has happened. And he's asking for help for his wife because since his wife has had this baby, she's been very sick in bed. There's been something going on and he thinks that something might be like hurting her more than would typically. And there are hints earlier in this book that there can be spirits. I think they're called revenants, I think is what he called them, but that stick around if like women who are still pregnant are buried incorrectly, if the baby is not given certain rights after their death, they could come back and essentially haunt people, but haunt people in a way that they could kill them. And so he is called on to come and help this mother and see if there is a spirit that is harming her. So that's like one of the little side stories that you get. You also get to hear about the foundlings. It's a very small part of the story, but you get to hear about like the politics within the kingdom, how these people live, how there is like a a caste system that they live by and how some people are harmed by this. Speaking of which, I don't think I've mentioned, if you haven't read The Goblin Emperor is a series that has goblins and elves and foundlings in it. And so there are a whole bunch of fantastical creatures that are living in the same world together. And so within the two little novellas, you get to see more outside the palace, whereas The Goblin Emperor is set in the palace. This is set more in the villages surrounding, and so you get to see more of the kingdom dynamics versus the emperor dynamics. Another thing I really enjoyed about this so far is that our main character has an apprentice now. He is requested to train this woman whose name starts with a T. Thomaserin, I think is how you pronounce it. And she has come into her gift, her witness, so she can witness for the dead as an adult. And normally when children are found to have this gift, they are trained from a very young age to go into their calling and help with investigations and giving last rites and things like that. And so she's kind of lost. And the religious organization that controls and gives power to the witnesses for the dead doesn't really know what to do with her and kind of throws her into Thara's lap and is like, you deal with her. We don't know what to do, so she's your problem now. And so he's trying to help her find herself and find a use for the powers that she's been given. And it's just quite lovely. This book gives me faith in humanity, even though it's not about humanity. But I've really enjoyed it so far. So, like I said, I'm 35% of the way in. I will let you know when I am a little bit further. Hello guys, I'm back for another update for The Grief of Stones. I'm currently at 80%, and I had to force myself to stop reading. I only have about 50 pages left in the book, and I know I'm gonna finish it tonight. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update prior to me finishing, and so I can tell you my final thoughts on the book, but I'm still loving it. I absolutely love this world. I love Thara Kelleher. He is probably, I don't know, like he just feels like a friend. Like he feels like someone who I've read stories about for years, which is not the case. And I really like his character. A couple of things I wanted to tell you guys about, and they're not like huge plot points by any means, but I think that they're going to give context to why I find this story so cozy. So we know that Thara is a witness for the dead, and he is approached by numerous people throughout this to petition to get help for various causes. And one of the like really sweet ones that just came up was there was a baker who has always been kind of the provider of this village's scones. They love it, and they come in early, they wait hours for them, they, rant and rave about this man's scones. He's a goblin, I believe. And he ends up passing away suddenly. And his business partners, who are going to run the bakery after he's now deceased, are fretful that they're going to lose their business because they have no way of replicating the baker's scones. He never gave anyone the recipe, and so it's kind of, they come to Thara and tell him, like, we realize that this is really trivial and maybe we shouldn't ask, but it's important to us, and it was important to him. And so he goes to this bakery to figure out, to essentially talk to the dead to try and find this recipe, and just helps them. So I'm not going to tell you exactly what happens with that little tiny storyline, and it's such a small part of the story, but just little tiny things like that throughout this entire narrative, it just solidifies how cozy this is and how important Thara believes his position to be and how integral he is to society, even though there are some people who clearly think that he isn't. There also is like the main through lines in this, the murder mysteries that are going on. There is really two storylines in this, two like overarching storylines in this, as opposed to, I think The Witness for the Dead had one main murder mystery that we were solving. The second storyline in this, while absolutely wild, I did not anticipate where the second storyline ended up. And so that was crazy in and of itself. But it leads Thara to have something happen to him. And I'm not going to give you any more details than that. And I'm just wondering how the story is going to end. I have 50 pages left. So we've got a little bit of time for things to either get worse or get better. And I'm worried. One of the things that I have absolutely loved about all of these stories, The Grief of Stones, Witness for the Dead, The Goblin Emperor, is the author does an amazing job of reaching into the human psyche and talking about the mundane things that make us human. So even though, like, we're talking about goblins and elves, but still. With The Goblin Emperor, we were dealing with Maya and having to have him debate this need for friendship and this inevitability of being lonely as someone who is very powerful, and him having to navigate that as a person who needed to lead his people. And within The Grief of Stones and The Witness for the Dead, because we're following the Witness for the Dead, Thara Kalahar, we are dealing with grief and sadness and someone who literally is surrounded by death all the time. Sometimes in a bittersweet way, like in the instance with the bakery where he's helping someone cherish the memory of someone who has died. But then in other ways, he's solving murders and he has to live those murders with those people. I can't imagine living in a world where you are surrounded by death and still having his outlook on life and trying to be as beneficial to the people around him as he possibly can be. And this story doesn't shy away, and neither does The Witness for the Dead. It doesn't shy away from him struggling with it. It's not easy for him. It's not something that he can just brush off his shoulders and walk away. And at the moment, we have a really significant potential spiral that could happen. And I want to know. And I my heart reaches out to him, which is amazing. So that's my 80% update. The next time I talk to you guys, I will be done with this, and I am imagining it's going to be a 5-star because I just love this. I can't remember what I gave Witness for the Dead, if it was 5 or if it was a 4.5. I think the first time I read The Goblin Emperor, or the only time I read The Goblin Emperor, I only gave it 4.5 stars, but I think upon reread, I might up it because I've lived with the characters, and I think that they're just part of my heart at this point in time. And so I don't know, I'll have to go back and look to see what I gave Witness for the Dead, and I'll let you know in the final update. But I shall see you guys in a little bit. Hello again. It is time for me to start the second book of this vlog, which is The Sky on Fire by Jen Lyons. This one, I think it was at 41% the last time I checked. So this was definitely the vast majority of you chose this book, because I don't think any of the rest of them broke 20%, if I remember correctly. So this definitely was in the lead by a large margin. And I am really excited to get to this book because I really enjoyed the Chorus of Dragon series by Jen Lyons. I have been in a very dragony mood recently, and so I'm very excited that you guys chose this one for me. I have already gotten to 20%, so I wanted to stop and talk to you guys about it before I get too far into the book. I am just going to tell you what I know so far. I went into this completely blind. I knew it was about dragons because of the cover, and I knew that I'd liked the author in the past, but that's really all I knew going in. And so right now we have found out that there is a person who, well, okay, I'll start with like the first scene kind of that we see in this storyline, which is a party for a 15-year-old boy. It's in a castle, and it's kind of a castle. That's kind of how I have thought of it, because it's this grand kind of estate. And the mayor of the town, it's his son who they're celebrating, and there's a whole bunch of, important people in the room or whatever, and there's this huge boom that happens, and they know that a dragon has landed on the roof of this castle. And so there's some concern there. A dragon rider walks in the room, is taken possession of by the dragon, which is a new thing for me. Like I guess I've seen some movies and heard like them communicating to their dragon riders, but never that the dragons can speak through their dragon riders. So that's an interesting development, and that happens like in the first couple of pages. And he essentially tells the mayor that this little town has been accused of treason. They know that they're harboring someone that they shouldn't, and tells him that he needs to capture and deliver this person to the dragons, to like the first dragon. And otherwise the town is going to be ransacked by dragons, which is obviously not great. And the mayor of the town tells the dragon, like, that's not possible. That person was executed 17 years ago. And the dragon's like, nope, we have it on good authority that that person is still alive. And if you can't find them and deliver them for us, we're going to assume that you're harboring them. So they're given a timeline. They're given, I think, a month of time to track down this person and get them. And all the while this conversation is happening, the mayor's son is listening to this conversation and decides to take it in his own hands to go and find this person so his father and the town can be safe. Like 15-year-old boys sometimes do. So really the only thing that we have going on right now is we have seen so that was kind of the prologue, and the first 20% was really about the person that they are hunting for, which I can't remember her name. Hold on. The person they're hunting for is Honorad, and we know that this person has done something to piss off the dragons. We don't know what. And they were apparently like, it sounds like they were dropped off a cliff into what they call the deep, which I was assuming were like oceans, but really it's almost like the area that they live in with all the dragons is like this mountainous area, and the deep is, you know, below sea level, like not literally underwater, but just below sea level. And apparently it's very hot, and there are a lot of monsters, drakes, worms, and wyverns walking around that are very dangerous. And so it's kind of a place you don't want to live. And apparently when they dropped her off this cliff, she did live, because we are in her perspective for the first 20% of the book. I don't know what's going to happen after this, but essentially you jump into her life in the deep and how she is on the run. This is 17 years after her apparent execution. And so she's been living in the deep for all that time. We don't know any of like what's happened. We know that she has pissed somebody off in the deep as well. And we have the son of the mayor show up with a gang of people, and they convince her to help them exit the deep because they're clearly not supposed to be there. And obviously this is a ruse for them to try and get her out of the deep, and, you know, events transpire. I really enjoy it so far. I think it's been a lot of fun. We know that Honorad, which I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. It's either Anarad, or Honorad. I'm just gonna say Honorad if I can remember that I pronounced it that way. So Honorad, we know, has some form of power because she can control and communicate with animals. Specifically, she has a Titan Drake that she is in communication with at the very beginning of the book. And that's very fascinating, and how like that power works. She has a moment where she needs to she's like in the Drake's mind, and her body is kind of like slack, and she needs to get back into her body, and she has to go through like certain things have to happen in order for her to do that. And I have really enjoyed Jen Lyon's ability to show you how something is done instead of telling you. I'm living in this world. I have no idea what's happening, but I feel like I am figuring out things as we go without the characters having to be told. Because obviously, Honorad has lived in the deep for 17 years. She's had this power her entire life. And so she doesn't need the power to be explained to her. And so having someone explain it would be kind of dumb. So having these moments of time, these moments of action that are happening where we have to see XYZ happen before, you know, ABC can happen, I think is really, it's fun. So it's a learning process. I'm liking it. Even the boy who, I think his name is Gwydinian. I think. Gwydion, I think is his name. The names in this book are wild, and I am reading this via ebook, so I have no idea how to pronounce any of them. One of the things, and probably the last thing I will leave you on at the 20% mark, is I am fascinated with the fact that dragons might be the bad guys. And I don't have any confirmation in that whatsoever, but there is this tension between our main character, Honorad, and the dragons. Obviously, they wanted her to be executed 17 years ago, and there are events that we are unaware of, but within the dragons themselves, I have seen friction, and the fact that some dragons are potentially trying to betray others. And then we also have the fact that the dragons are almost like bullying this community, but they're respected as well. It's a very weird dynamic, but it's kind of turned dragons on its head, because I've seen a lot of dragon books where dragons are utilized as a tool for people. And granted, in a lot of books, dragons are very intelligent, and in order to be used as a tool, the people have to like work with them and, you know, befriend them or, you know, become bonded to them. But it's typically speaking, I feel like it's not the dragons calling the shots, if that makes sense. Like, maybe for themselves, maybe for like their actions and whether or not they participate, they call the shots. But when it's talking about like all of society and how society interacts with one another, it seems like the dragons are in complete control, which is interesting. So I'm excited to continue on. I don't know how many updates I will give you guys, because I do have 5 days left with the ebook, and this is a pretty chunky book. It's like 460 pages, which I did not realize when I was, you know, waiting to read it. I should have been reading it way before now, because I do feel like I'm gonna have to, you know, it's crunch time and like sit down and just read for a few days, but I'm not mad at it because I am enjoying the book. So I will talk to you guys in a little bit. Hello guys, I have gotten to 70% and it's been a little bit of a slog. I am not enjoying myself, which is kind of disappointing because I really wanted to like this book. So I guess what I'm going to do is, because of the fact that I'm at 70%, I'm not going to give you guys any plot points, but I might tell you some overarching themes that I'm not enjoying, and then I'll talk about, let me talk about what I like first, and then I'll talk about the things that I'm not enjoying. So I do really like how dragons are done in this book. I like the fact that we have now learned about the different, we don't know all of them yet, but we know that there are different types of dragons. They have different types of elements that they control. So we have run into a dragon that controls lightning and control like the weather. We have another that can breathe fire. We have another that can breathe acid. We have one that can form ice, and they all have like other powers as well. We also learn about the fact that these dragons have hordes, and there are certain rules on their hordes and who can hoard what, which I have liked. The politics surrounding dragons and how they interact with people has been very fascinating. I also have really liked the developments within the world, although we haven't gotten a ton of it, but I do understand the world a little bit better than I did in the 20% mark. So I talked to you guys a little bit about the deep and the fact that the deep is, I think I said it was below sea level, but it's actually at sea level on this planet, but it's very, very warm. It's not a fun place to live. There's a ton of monsters, dragons, and things roaming. It's very dangerous to live there. Well, the people who are, you know, the civilized people of the world live on mountaintops. So that's why we have the deep, and then we have the Skylanders. So they call the people who live in the deep deepers. And I have found that level of, I think that it's really fun to picture a whole bunch of cities built in mountaintops, and so they have to use like flying ships to go from one city to the next, unless they have their own dragon, but dragons don't really like to be transport because they're kind of uppity and they, you know, control society, and so they're not going to be the people who transport civilians or whatever. But I have found that really intriguing. We also have just gotten to the City of Dragons. Well, not just, but I think around the 50% mark, you get to the City of Dragons and you get to learn more about the city and its purpose. And we know from the very beginning of the book that there are people who are called dragon riders. They are people who are bonded to these dragons, and you get to learn more about them within this city, how the city functions and how it helps produce and bring up dragon riders and what that means for the people who are going through that process, which I do like. It's not really a school environment, so I don't want to give that impression to anyone who really likes, you know, like Fourth Wing's environment of you have a dragon riding school where you're learning to ride dragons, or like Fireborn. It's not like that. We don't see the lessons these people are given, but we do learn about the culture of being a dragon rider and how things are done within this city. They are even told at the very beginning whenever they get there that it's not a contest, which I'm not going to explain why, but that is told to them. So I have appreciated the differences between some of the previous books that I've seen with dragon riders and this one. I also really like the developments that we've learned about with the relationships between dragon riders and their dragons. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Essentially, we've kind of got down to the nitty-gritty on what some people have to go through when bonding to certain dragons, and how it's not, you know, it's not the same. Depends on who the person is, who the dragon is, their personalities. And I also like the I don't want to give too much away, but there's something that we learn about later in the book that is a potential for the relationship between dragons and their dragon riders, something that they can potentially do as like a unit that I am intrigued with. And I would like to see more of that, and I'm sure that we will in the last, 70% that I have, but I've liked that. Now on to the things that I have not enjoyed. One of them is I really have felt the chaos of this storyline, especially in the beginning. It has leveled out, I guess I will say, in the middle portion of the book, but in the beginning, I felt like we were going in a whole bunch of different directions. The main character was literally kidnapped like 4 times, and each time it like reset where we were headed, or like what I thought the book was supposed to be about. And I don't know if that was intentional by the author, or if maybe when the book was started, like there were different ideas that the author had, and we just ended up on the last one. That's what it felt like to me, because in the 4 kidnappings that we have of the main character, I have like okay, this is the main track that the book is going. This is the journey that we're going to be on. And then it's like, oh wait, no, this is the journey that we're going to be on. Oh wait, no, this is the journey that we're going to be on. And now we're finally in what I hope to be the last track and the last journey that we're going to take. But the first of them, I almost feel like we could have written, and I am not a writer, so, I'm saying this with a grain of salt, but like each of the storylines that we had could have been their own book, as far as the journey that we could have gone on. Anyway, but the one that we ended up at is a heist story, which I did not expect. I was not thinking heist whenever I first picked up this book about dragons. And so if you do like heists, you will probably like this book. And I guess, that's subjective, but whatever. I myself am hit or miss with heists. I really liked Mistborn. I really did not like, I think it was called A Portrait of Thieves. I read a couple years ago, or last year, whichever year it came out is when I read it. And so I don't know. It just kind of depends on where the story goes, and really it depends on whether or not I like the characters. And I'm not really liking the characters in this book. And it's not even that I don't like them, I just don't care. Within this story, I feel like a character could die on the next page I read, and I would just keep going. Which I shouldn't feel that way. I could feel that way about certain characters, but I should feel something, and I just feel nothing. I am a cold, dead soul at this point in reading the book. It has been hard for me to pick this up, and I have to because it's due in 3 days at the library, and it's not a short book. And I'm not even reading it on audio, so I have to like physically sit down and focus on this book. And it has been a challenge, my friends. I am doing this for you. I really do think that there have been moments that I have contemplated DNFing. I feel bad saying this because obviously this is someone put their heart and soul into writing this book. And this is an author I have really enjoyed in the past. But I just don't feel like any of the characters are well developed because there are a lot of characters. But when I read the Course of Dragons series, my heart bled for those characters anytime something bad happened. And when there were relationships in that book, I was rooting for them or rooting against them, depending on whether or not you wanted them to be together. But there was so much heart in those characters that I'm a little shocked at this book that I just feel like they're surface level. They're people that have been dropped on a page like sprinkles and they roll off as needed. Like, I don't know. And so talking about relationships, the relationships in this book are another dislike for me. I believe this will end up as a polyamorous story. It could be why choose, but there's definitely like more than one love interest. And there's no chemistry. It just feels like casual sex between them, which is fine. Like, whatever, that's okay if that's what they want. And it's been consensual, but it's like they are acting like it's going to be more than that though, right? Like, the words that I'm hearing them tell me say that they want more of this person or that it could potentially grow into something more serious. And I'm just not seeing it. I don't get anyone's attraction to anyone else other than like blatant physical attraction, which has been stated multiple times about the two characters that our main character is supposed to be attracted to. But if you're thinking like, this person could be my forever, I guess I want more than that, than just physical attraction. And there is one specific relationship that is with someone who is in our main character's past. And I've been very disappointed by that relationship. He's a very interesting character, and I would have liked to have lived with her in their past, because now I just feel like I'm being told that this relationship was really strong and it really meant something at the time, and they've been through like a really hard time, and there have been moments where he will say something or act in a way that shows that he cares about her, but there's not enough of that. There's not enough for me to say like, I believe in my heart of hearts that these people have been together for a long time. They have history, whether or not that's good or bad. I don't believe it. One last dislike has another thing to do with the characters, and that is I don't know that the young characters in this book are aged correctly. For me, anyway. Like, this is in my opinion. But one of our main characters is supposed to be a 15-year-old boy, and to me, he reads younger than that. Which is okay. Like, I don't mind him being younger, but then there have been some discussions there was one particular discussion between him and our main character surrounding sex, and our main character is in her 30s. And I just don't understand why there had to be a conversation between a 15-year-old boy and a 30-year-old woman about sexual relationships. Like, she wasn't coming on him and he wasn't coming on to her. Like, it wasn't anything like that. And I don't think that it was done in an inappropriate way. It was very awkward to me, and the characters acted like it was just kind of, I think the 30-year-old was kind of like, oh, whatever. But like, she kind of blushed or whatever at the comment that the boy made. But for me, and maybe this is just me, but for me, if I was talking to a 15-year-old boy and he happened to say something about my sex life, I would immediately shut the conversation down. Nope, and we're done. Like, and moving on. Like, nope, that's not a necessary conversation with you. It's different if you're talking to your kids or whatever, but like, I don't know. That was uncomfortable for me. I didn't like that. One last thing that I will say that I didn't mention about that I liked was the dragon battle. So there is a fight between dragons that doesn't last like a ton of chapters, but it was really fun to see these dragons fight it out. The ramifications of these gigantic creatures fighting in the middle of a city, and it kind of gave me Godzilla vibes a little bit, but you know, more fantasy and more magic, but it was very fun to see. So I did like that. I would like more of that. I don't know that I'm gonna get it, but we'll find out. I am interested in how this ends. I have contemplated DNFing a couple of times because it is just a struggle for me to even want to pick up this book. But there's enough pieces that I'm kind of like grasping at straws that I'm hoping I'll grab onto something and it will really intrigue me and I'll really like the way that this book ends, but we'll find out. Hi again. So I realized after looking through some of the footage, I'm done with both books now, and I was getting on to do my outro for The Sky on Fire and realized that I never did an outro for The Grief of Stones. So I figured I would just do my final thoughts on both books in one clip so you guys can see what I thought of these. But before we get to this, I do want to talk or just let you know that I have purchased the Hollow Places. So this was the pick that you guys had for me. I was going to purchase a book that I had read, that I had loved, and this was the one that you guys chose for me. So this is my, I think, oh, never mind. I was gonna say this was my first T. Kingfisher, but I own Thornhedge as well. So I'm going to collect many, many more of T. Kingfisher's books, I'm sure, but I am excited to have this one in my collection because this was the first, well, probably not the first ever, but within my booktube channel, within like me kind of getting back into reading in my adult life, this was the first horror novel that I read that kind of got me into realizing that I kind of like the genre. And so I'm happy to finally have this one. So thank you guys for choosing this one. Now, on to my thoughts of The Grief of Stones. So I will tell you right now that this is a 5-star read for me. I absolutely loved being back in this world. I love the character, which I can't remember his name, Thara Kelleher. And what happens in this? So The Witness for the Dead, which is the book before this one, I read, I don't know if it was earlier this year, if it was last year, but this was I think it was last year. This is a 4.5 star. And the Goblin Emperor was up there as well. So either a 4.5 or a 5 star, I can't remember. But I have absolutely loved this series. I think that the reason this one ended up being a 5 star for me is because we really delved into Kelleher's roots, and some things happen in this book that are just tragic, and I don't know. I think I've just gotten to know the character enough that this just felt like home for me, which all of the books have felt very nostalgic. I will say something that is something I can say for this author, that I can find that, and this is the only series I've read by this author, but I can say that this writing style does feel very comfy, cozy for me. I can't tell you much. I really want to tell you what happens at the end because that is, the ending is what raised it to a 5 star for me. But yeah, I can't tell you that because I want you to go and read it. So I will tell you, if you enjoyed The Goblin Emperor, if you enjoyed The Witness for the Dead, or if you haven't gotten to this series and you liked The Goblin Emperor, if you enjoyed Kelleher's character in The Goblin Emperor, please read these. These are absolutely fantastic, phenomenal books. And yeah, I don't know that there's much else I want to say. So just know I loved it. You guys picked a good one. I'm excited that I don't pick up many books before I have read them, and so I'm really glad to have this little series in my collection. Next, we need to talk about The Sky on Fire, which I didn't love, and I think I told you, I think I updated you guys at 70%. And yeah, this is gonna end up being a 3.25 for me. So this isn't horrible. But I just, there were so many things about this book that I didn't enjoy. I think the ending is fun because it's very fast paced. I mean, things are just happening left and right. But I did get that feeling of pivoting once again from, I talked about this in my first clip for the book, that I just felt like we were headed in this direction, and now we're heading in this direction, now we're heading in this direction, and that happens again at the end of the book because there are so many pieces that we have to tie back together, and the characters come together in the end to do something specific. But I feel like some of what happened was very convenient. We did have another like dragon battle scene at the end, and that is my favorite part of this book, is the dragons. Like the dragon, specifically the dragon battle scenes, where we get to see the intricacies of and the differences between all the different types of dragons and what they can do. So I do like that, but there are a couple of things that happen at the end that it was like this huge climactic, or it should have been this huge climactic event, because of how much we focused on certain things within this book. And then it just seemed like it was too easy. Or it ended too quickly. Like I don't think that there were enough hurdles at the end for my liking. So I think I've said this in one of my other clips, but just to reiterate, one of the things that I really didn't like about the story is the characters. I think that I am so disappointed in the character development in this. I feel like that is due to the fact that this is only one book, whereas The Chorus of Dragons, Jen Lyons had 5 very large books to develop these characters. And so we were able to take our time in getting to know them and seeing inside their heads and figuring out how they feel. And they felt very multidimensional. Whereas the characters in this book, I feel like, are very minimalistic, I guess. And perhaps Jen Lyons wanted to take a crack at like a more plot focused book. And if that's the case, then I suppose this was a success. And I didn't hate a lot of the book, so that's why it ended up with a 3.25, but I think I just went in with such high expectations because I have loved her books in the past that this was just a little bit disappointing for me, but that's okay. You can't win them all. So with that, we have a 5-star, we have a new addition to my collection, and a 3.25 star. So I think this was a successful vlog. Thank you guys so much for helping me choose which books to read and which books to add to my collection. It's always fun to see what you guys will pick for me. And yeah, let me know in the comments down below if you guys have read either of these books or if you're interested in either of these books. And if you don't feel like chatting, is there a dragon emoji? Or if you can't find a dragon, leave a dinosaur for me so I know that you guys are here. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.